A fire broke out, and my husband's neighbor's sister went blind trying to save him. Since then, she has been the family's benefactor. When I was taken to the hospital due to complications, my husband left me the moment he received her call. Alex, she can't see anything now. She needs me more. I can't ignore her, I owe her this. I believe you can understand. So, I lay alone on the operating table. It's not viable, let it go. As a result, my payment details were sent to my husband's phone. When I opened my eyes, there was a persistent, unbearable pain in my lower abdomen. The doctor, while removing his gloves, instructed, "You're quite far along. Make sure to take your medication on time to avoid incomplete miscarriage. You may need a follow-up procedure." I nodded with a pale face. My legs were trembling as I got up. The doctor frowned. "Are you here alone? Where's your husband?" I forced a smile. "He's off being romantic with his mistress." The doctor looked at me with a mix of astonishment and sympathy. I nonchalantly took out my phone from my bag. It showed around 20 missed calls and a dozen messages, all from my husband, Ethan. The latest message was particularly emotional, with exclamation marks dominating the screen. "Alex, are you crazy? You're having an abortion? How dare you make this decision without my consent? Get back here immediately." When I registered my pregnancy, my phone had some issues and couldn't receive verification codes. So, the hospital's contact number was my husband's. Naturally, the payment notification for the abortion was sent to him. But that's all right. I didn't plan to hide this from him anyway. Just as I finished reading the messages, Ethan's call came through. I answered, and his voice, barely containing his fury, almost burst through the phone. "Where's the baby?" Calmly, I replied. "It's gone." There was a sudden pause in his breathing. Ethan, enraged, took several deep breaths before speaking in a low voice. "What are you thinking? This child is mine too. How could you make this decision on your own?" I chuckled and asked him in return, "Have you resolved the issue with Jillian?" Jillian and Ethan grew up together as childhood friends. Jillian never hid her feelings for Ethan, pursuing him from childhood to adulthood. Unfortunately, Ethan always saw her as a sister and never reciprocated her feelings. When Ethan proposed to me, I asked if he truly had no feelings for Jillian. He assured me he didn't. Only then did I step into marriage with him. He behaved impeccably after marriage, never crossing the line, and remained just friends with Jillian. But everything changed after the fire 6 months ago. The fire was caused by a gas leak. The villa was engulfed in smoke in an instant. At the time, I was on a business trip, but Jillian happened to be at home. It's said that when she saw the fire next door, she rushed in without hesitation. Despite her frail frame, she managed to save Ethan from gas poisoning but lost her sight due to a small explosion. She became blind. I hurried back, rushing straight from the airport to the hospital, only to see Jillian gripping Ethan's hands tightly. Jillian cried pitifully. "Ethan, I'm so scared. I can't see anything." "It's okay, it's okay." Ethan looked at her with such gravity and made a promise. "Jill, don't be afraid. From now on, no matter when, as long as you need me, I'll always be there." When he made that promise to her, he might have completely forgotten about me, his wife. Family and friends all tried to persuade me. They said that without Jillian, Ethan would have died long ago. Jillian is the benefactor of our entire family. They told me to be more magnanimous and tolerant. But they are not me. How could they know what I have endured in this relationship? Jillian became the first priority in Ethan's heart. On my 30th birthday, Ethan left me just because Jillian couldn't find the stuffed toy she hugs to sleep, and he spent the whole night looking for it. During my countless pregnancy checkups, Ethan never attended even once because Jillian would say, "Ethan, I'm scared." Even just a few hours ago, I suddenly started bleeding at home. Jillian summoned him, and Ethan immediately left me. "Alex, I called a car. It's on its way to pick you up." I'll come to you right after I take care of Jill. Be good, she can't see anything and really needs me." After saying that, he left without looking back. Seeing Ethan waiting for me at the hospital entrance, I hung up the phone and opened the passenger door. Jillian was sitting there. Her eyes were unfocused, but she smelled my perfume and lightly coughed, pinching her nose. Ethan's face immediately darkened. "Didn't I tell you not to wear so much perfume? Jill has rhinitis." I slammed the passenger door shut, saying, "You guys go ahead. I'll take a cab. What are you making a fuss about now?" Ethan said, suppressing his anger. "Get in the car." Jillian, fumbling to unbuckle her seatbelt, said cautiously, "I'm sorry, Alex. Is it because I'm sitting in the front seat that you're upset?" "I'm sorry, I can't see, so I..." Ethan gently pressed her back into her seat and buckled her seatbelt for her. "Why are you apologizing? I was the one who helped you into the front seat." With a pale face, she spoke nervously. "Ethan, please don't argue because of me. I will feel very guilty. Maybe the situation with the child isn't what you think it is. Let's talk it out. It's also my fault. If I had known Alex was bleeding, I wouldn't have called you." Her appearance would soften anyone's heart. But not mine. Every word she said was dripping with insincerity. I couldn't stand it anymore and sneered. "Jillian, you know you shouldn't sit in the front seat of a married man's car. You shouldn't call a married man to your house anytime, anywhere. You shouldn't refer to a married man as brother every chance you get, right? Is he really just a brother, or is he more like a lover?" Ethan, enraged, raised his hand and slapped me. I was stunned, covering my face and looking at him in disbelief. He was also shocked, his raised hand still frozen in mid-air, nervously clenching into a fist. "You guys can go," I said with disgust. "I'll take a cab." This time, Ethan didn't say anything more. As he got into the car, he rolled down the window and hastily said, "I'm sorry." I scoffed. Who wants to hear his apology? It was rush hour, and being a weekend, there was a long line of over 200 people waiting for rides. After waiting and waiting, the one who came was still Ethan. Having just had the procedure, my body couldn't take it anymore, so I got in the car. I sat in the back seat. After a long silence, my curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to know what Jillian had done this time to make Ethan leave me. So I asked, "What happened with Jillian this time?" Ethan, visibly irritated, pressed down hard on the horn at a red light, the sound blaring recklessly. He was trying to control his emotions. "She has a very important dinner party tonight and wanted me to go buy a dress with her." "Oh." The car fell into another intriguing silence. As the car started moving again, Ethan lit a cigarette, flicking the ash outside. The suffocating smell of smoke began to fill the car. I rolled down the window, waving the smoke outside. Ethan then said, "Since the baby is gone, I don't need to quit smoking anymore." I squinted my eyes and said faintly, "Probably because Jillian isn't around." Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter, growing more angry but suppressing it. He changed the topic. "What's the situation with the baby? Did the doctor suggest an abortion because it couldn't be saved?" I raised an eyebrow in surprise and replied, "Is this the excuse Jillian came up with for me?" Ethan's face darkened. "What do you mean by that?" "Nothing." I raised an eyebrow, my eyes full of provocation. "The doctor said if I stayed in the hospital for a couple of days, the baby would be fine. The truth is just as you suspected. I didn't want it." Ethan's hand shook, and the half-smoked cigarette fell into the endless traffic outside. Ethan could no longer suppress his anger. He roared, "Alex, are you mad? The baby was perfectly fine. Why would you have an abortion?" Suddenly, I couldn't help but laugh. Because I suddenly thought of the excuse Ethan had given. Buying a dress. I chuckled softly. What a clumsy and ridiculous reason, and Ethan really left me while I was bleeding to go buy a dress with Jillian. As a wife, I was truly pathetic. Seeing me laugh, Ethan slammed the steering wheel, his voice filled with uncontrollable anger. What are you laughing at? What's so funny? At the red light, he stepped on the brake and turned his head to look at me. Nothing. My tone was flat, as if I didn't care. I just think buying a dress is more important than having a baby. The words were so pointed that even if Ethan were slow-witted, he would understand my implication. Not only did he not feel ashamed, but he also exploded. He looked at me with disappointment and said, "Alex, how could you think of me like that?" I found it amusing. How did I think of you? I thought you understood me, but in the end, you are also looking at me through colored glasses? Ethan let out a long breath. I've said countless times, I have no romantic feelings for Jillian. In the past, I only saw her as a sister. Now, besides being a sister, she has an even more important identity. She's my benefactor. I owe her, and I can never repay her in this lifetime. The red light ended, and the green light came on. Ethan stepped on the gas, and the car smoothly merged into the rush hour traffic. My thoughts had drifted far away, but Ethan continued. You are physically weak now, so I won't argue with you about the baby. Anyway, we are still young. We can have more children. He pinched the bridge of his nose. Take this opportunity to take some time off and rest at home. Think it over carefully. I hope you can understand that for the rest of my life, I will never turn a blind eye to anything regarding Jill. Anything at all. He added. And if I can't figure it out? I countered. There's no other way. He said firmly. This is what I owe her, and as my wife, you must understand that. I laughed. Then I just won't be your wife. Ethan seemed to think I would never choose to divorce him. And for good reason. My parents were gone, and since meeting him, my life had completely revolved around him, severing all my social connections. As for work, I once had an opportunity to manage a branch office out of town. But in my love-struck state, I declined to avoid a long-distance relationship. Over the years, my position had not advanced at all, my salary had not increased, and I was practically a housewife. He probably thought I had no other support and would only choose to stay by his side. Little did he know, after losing the baby, I started preparing the divorce papers. I had even found a backup plan for work. My boss was heartbroken by my sudden realization. You missed the best years for your career. As they say, it's never too late to start. I replied. Sighing, my boss patted my shoulder. You didn't want to take the position as the head of the branch office before, and now the branch has already been set up, but its performance is still lacking. It would be good for you to go there and lead the team. However, the position of head is no longer available. I'll try to get you the post of deputy head. Over the years, if it weren't for your love-obsessed nature holding you back, you should have been promoted long ago. I thanked her sincerely and accepted the arrangement, planning to move to New York in 2 months. Unexpectedly, the news of my promotion to deputy head and transfer to New York reached Ethan before it reached me. And it was Jillian who told him. That day happened to be Ethan's mother's birthday. The old house was full of people, and I arrived late. As soon as I entered, I saw Jillian sitting on the sofa, crying with red eyes. She clutched the corner of Ethan's clothes, looking guilty. Ethan, I'm sorry. I really didn't know that Alex would mind my presence so much. If I had known, even if I fell, got hurt, or bumped into things, I wouldn't have troubled you. I'll apologize to her when she arrives. I'll promise her that I won't trouble you again. Don't worry, I'll persuade Alex not to go to New York. Ethan's mother had a stern face full of displeasure. She has quite a temper. Just because you didn't go with her for the checkup, she went ahead and aborted the child. I told you from the beginning, she shouldn't have been brought into this family. My love story with Ethan had once been the talk of the town. Only because we had a passionate love, despite strong opposition from the Ethan family. He was willing to give up the Ethan family's inheritance for me and sever ties with his parents. He was an only child, and his parents were eventually more tolerant. Though displeased, they recognized me as their daughter-in-law because of his firm stance. But they had always disapproved of me. Now, they had a hold over me. Ethan's mother clutched Jillian's hand comfortingly. "Jill, we watched you grow up. We know your character best. Of course, Auntie believes you have no other intentions. Besides, if it weren't for you, my son's life would have been lost. My son is the husband she's supposed to spend her life with. Not just for a child, but even if it cost her life, Alex should give it." Her words were firm, but no one responded because they had already seen me. All eyes were on me, waiting to see me make a fool of myself. A scumbag and a foolish girl, I seemed to be the one who deserved to be despised. I couldn't help but laugh, slowly took off my coat, and hung it on the hook. "Well, isn't this lively?" I looked at Jillian, raising an eyebrow slightly. "Weren't you going to apologize? What are you waiting for?" Jillian's face turned pale. "Alex, you're here." She hesitated and delayed. First, she groped to support herself on the sofa to stand up, then started walking forward, her calf hitting the sharp corner of the coffee table. It cut her skin and a string of blood beads rolled out. She winced in pain but still stubbornly said, "I'm sorry, Alex. It's my fault." Her performance was smooth, fully arousing Ethan's protective instincts. He grabbed Jillian's hand, gently helping her to sit aside, then stood up to confront me. "Alex, why do you have to be so aggressive?" I laughed. "I barely said a word. Who am I being aggressive towards?" Ethan's mother was the first to speak. "Alex, I heard you're going to work in New York. If you go to New York, who will take care of Ethan? Have you thought about that?" She frowned, looking at me with great disapproval. "And about the child, you made the decision on your own. Didn't you think to consult us elders? It's my own body. Shouldn't I have the right to make decisions about it?" I said calmly. "As for going to New York, since you all already know, there's no need for me to say more. I don't agree." Ethan stood up with a stern face. "Alex, why didn't you discuss your plans to go to New York with me? Are you still holding a grudge about Jillian? How can you be so petty? Jillian is already like this. What more do you want from her?" I suddenly realized that his gaze at me was full of anger. There was no longer any trace of the love he once had. Instead, it was all directed at Jillian. She received all his tenderness. And he still absurdly claimed it was just gratitude. Not love. All my desire to argue vanished in that moment. I felt tired, unwilling to communicate further, and simply said, "Think whatever you want." This attitude only made Ethan angrier. He glared at me, disregarding everything. "If you insist on going to New York, then let's get a divorce." He stared at me, full of confidence, as if certain I would never divorce him. Unexpectedly, I smiled. "Isn't it a coincidence?" I raised an eyebrow slightly, my tone full of sarcasm. "I didn't really want to come to your mother's birthday party. But considering that apart from this occasion, I wouldn't see you otherwise. After all, you're always with Jillian. Thinking it over, if I wanted to find you, I had to come here." In front of the entire Ethan family, I handed over the divorce papers. Coincidentally, I came to ask for a divorce. Ethan looked as if he had been slapped in public. His face turned red with anger in an instant. I was dragged upstairs by Ethan. He lowered his voice. "You did this on purpose? To get back at me? In front of all those people, you had to humiliate me?" Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose wearily, his tone full of impatience. I sighed deeply and adopted an unprecedented serious attitude. "Ethan, I'm serious." Seeing him stiffen, I continued expressionlessly. "I've consulted a lawyer about the division of property. The part that belongs to me is all outlined in the divorce agreement. Fortunately, we don't have any children, so there won't be any lingering TIs or mess. His expression gradually turned serious. He realized that I was serious. Raising an eyebrow slightly, a complex mix of emotions began to spread in his eyes. After a long pause, he lowered his gaze and sighed from his throat. Seemingly helpless, he said, "All right, Alex, can we stop this nonsense? You just mind Jillian's presence, don't you? But I've promised you countless times that you'll be the only one for me in this life. Isn't that enough?" He looked at me so earnestly, his dark pupils seemingly filled with all his sincerity. But I laughed. "All right, then let me ask you one question. If I ask you to cut all ties with Jillian and never see her again, can you do that?" I sneered. "If you can do that, I won't divorce you." His face instantly darkened. "You're putting me in an impossible position. Let's not even mention that Jillian is an old family friend. She went blind saving me. If not for her, my life, your husband's life, would have been lost long ago. If I truly ignore her, our family would be seen as ungrateful by others. Alex, can't you look at the bigger picture?" He gripped my wrist tightly, pleading in a low voice. "I know you've endured a lot, but I have to swallow my grievances, is that it?" I let out a cold laugh, raised my hand and slapped him. Before he could react, I slapped him on the other cheek. Ethan was stunned by the two slaps, instinctively releasing his grip on me. He covered his face, his eyes full of astonishment. I raised an eyebrow and said calmly, "That's for you. Now, we're really even." Ethan delayed signing the divorce papers. In his words, our marital relationship hadn't broken down, and we'd only been separated for a month or two. Why divorce? But my move to New York was imminent, and I urgently needed to resolve everything here. So I chose a more effective solution: litigation. The day he received the lawsuit, Ethan sent me a shocked message on WeChat. "Alex, do you really have to take it this far? If you're trying to threaten me, you're going too far. Aren't you afraid I'll actually choose to divorce you?" I was both angry and amused, chugging half a bottle of red wine. So after all this time, this man thought I was using divorce to force him to stay away from Jillian? Ridiculous. I immediately blocked him. On the day of the court hearing, Jillian accompanied Ethan. She sat in the courtroom wearing sunglasses, not looking like someone who had lost her sight. As I walked past her, she even had a few mocking words for me. She said, "Alex, I told you I'd eventually take Ethan back. You won't be smug for long." She wore a victorious smile. "You see, with just a little trick, Ethan will be mine soon." I ignored her, but as I turned, my shoulder accidentally bumped into hers, causing her to cry out in surprise and drop her sunglasses. She frantically groped on the floor. Her palms were covered in dust. When I squatted to help pick up the sunglasses, Ethan rushed over and shoved me back. My waist hit the edge of a table, and I gasped in pain, frowning deeply. But Ethan held Jillian protectively, standing in front of her. "If you have any issues, come at me. Why bully Jillian? She can't see anything. You're going too far." Jillian's eyes reddened with grievance. "Ethan, I'm fine. Alex didn't mean it. She might have forgotten I can't see now." Not only did Ethan feel sorry for her, but everyone around started murmuring. "I heard this woman's husband was saved by someone, and she won't let him take responsibility. That's ungrateful. Jealousy shouldn't extend to the person who saved her husband, right? The poor girl is blind now. Helping her a bit wouldn't hurt. What a muddle-headed person. If you ask me, there's no harm in this divorce, but the man seems quite devoted and doesn't want to divorce." One by one, scorching gazes fell on me. Pointing fingers, full of curses. But I ignored them and took a seat at the hearing. Ethan was well prepared, presenting evidence to the judge that our relationship hadn't broken down. One piece of evidence was my prenatal checkup report. He lowered his eyes and sighed lightly. "The child was lost due to an accident, not because our relationship broke down. I love my wife deeply and don't want to end our marriage over a small misunderstanding." The more I listened, the more ridiculous it seemed. My scalp tingled. I had lived with such a man for so many years. "Miss Lee, do you have anything to say?" the judge asked. I replied calmly. "Yes. The child wasn't lost by accident." My simple statement was like throwing a stone into a calm lake, causing countless ripples. I signed the papers for the procedure myself. This woman is heartless. The child was already formed, how could she bear to do that? The courtroom was instantly filled with waves of shock. The judgmental gazes fell on me without restraint, and the judge quickly called for order. But Ethan's face had turned extremely ugly. I looked at him without fear and smiled lightly. To avoid any misunderstanding, I need to explain the situation at that time. That morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, I realized I was bleeding heavily. The child was already unstable, and I had been taking medication to keep the pregnancy. When I saw the blood, I immediately asked Mr. Ethan to take me to the hospital, but as soon as we stepped out of the house, Mr. Ethan received a call from Miss Jillian. Miss Jillian said she had a dinner party that evening and wanted to buy a dress, asking Mr. Ethan to accompany her. Without any hesitation, Mr. Ethan chose to leave me and drove off to pick up Miss Jillian. And I, alone, stood under the scorching sun for over 10 minutes before I could hail a cab and get myself to the hospital. The crowd's faces showed surprise, and they fell silent. Jillian suddenly stood up. "Alex, this was my fault. Please don't blame Ethan. Don't divorce him." I threatened him that if he didn't accompany me, I would jump from the building. He thought a life was at stake, so he hurried to stop me. He might have felt it wasn't right to disclose my privacy, so he didn't tell you. Since I lost my sight, I've been emotionally fragile and needed someone with me, so... If you must hate someone, hate me. I shouldn't have rushed into the fire and saved Ethan. If I hadn't, you wouldn't have reached the point of divorce. Ethan truly loves you. He really doesn't want to leave you. This move by Jillian immediately garnered sympathy from everyone. Even Ethan couldn't help but say, "Jill, don't say that. If it weren't for you, I'd probably just be ashes now, with no chance to sit here." He said self-deprecatingly. But I remained particularly calm throughout. After Jillian sat down, I continued. "Miss Jillian, are you done with your performance? If you're done, it's my turn." I looked at Ethan with a piercing gaze and a cold tone. "Mr. Ethan, you always say that you and Miss Jillian are just repaying a debt. Then what is this?" I turned to the judge. "Request to present evidence. Permission granted." On the large screen beside the courtroom, a photo of Jillian and Ethan passionately kissing appeared suddenly. The crowd was instantly in an uproar. Ethan sprang to his feet, his face extremely grim, his body stiff. I said expressionlessly, "Is Mr. Ethan planning to repay kindness the ancient way, by offering your body?" I curled my lips into a disdainful, mocking smile. Taking gratitude to the bed, Mr. Ethan and Miss Jillian are truly role models for us all. The evidence continued to roll. Jillian sat on Ethan's lap, the two of them in a heated embrace. I continued. "This photo was taken the day I had my procedure. The child was my flesh and blood. No one would have been more reluctant to lose him than me. But his father had long drifted away from this relationship. Bringing him into this world, would that really be a good thing? After careful consideration, I chose to terminate the pregnancy. I didn't want his birth to be unblessed by anyone, nor did I want his future to be forever shrouded in darkness." I closed my eyes in exhaustion. "Ethan, you always used the pretext of repaying a debt to carry on an affair with Miss Jillian. I didn't want to expose your dark side, but since you won't let me go, we can only go down together." Ethan opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. In the end, he sat down powerlessly, looking deeply at me. The court ruled for our divorce. The division of property was done according to the terms of the divorce agreement. Neither of us gained an advantage over the other. I was finally freed. The events of that courtroom session spread like wildfire overnight. The so-called act of repaying a debt remained a hot topic, generating heated discussions online. Netizens debated fiercely about whether the debt should be repaid, and if so, how. My social media platforms gained countless followers overnight, with some people even asking in the comments if I would still insist on the divorce if Ethan and Jillian hadn't crossed the line. I replied with just 2 words: I wouldn't. It had been half a month since the day of the court hearing. Less than half an hour after posting those 2 words, I saw Ethan on the stairs as I returned home. He was drunk, and when he saw me, he suddenly reached out and grabbed my pant leg. Alex. He called my name hoarsely. I miss you. He was holding a half-empty bottle of beer. I kicked his hand away in disgust. Getting drunk on beer? I then turned and walked upstairs without looking back. Unexpectedly, he followed me. He blocked my attempt to open the door, not moving even when I pressed down hard on his hand. I had no choice but to let him in. He finished the beer in his hand and then suddenly dropped to his knees with a thud. With a muffled voice, he pleaded, I truly love you. Please don't leave me, okay? He had lost a lot of weight. His beard was unkempt, his hair covered his eyes, and he looked disheveled. He was still wearing slippers as if he had forgotten to change. Looking at his bloodshot eyes, I couldn't help but let out a long sigh. In the beginning, when I found out that Jillian had saved Ethan, I was full of gratitude. I treated her as a distinguished guest and even considered her my lifesaver. But unfortunately, this act of repaying a debt slowly changed over time. It started when Jillian became his first choice. When countless important things of mine couldn't compare to a single call from Jillian. My gratitude slowly turned into something else. I could never understand why Ethan, while professing his love for me, would cross the line with Jillian. Until the day of the procedure, when I saw the photos sent by the private investigator. Everything became clear. Perhaps Ethan was moved, or maybe his feelings of gratitude turned into love. After all, a woman with good looks and a decent family background, willing to risk her life for you, who wouldn't be moved? But unfortunately, that man was my husband. I pushed his hand away. Ethan, we can't go back. His voice was strained. I know you mind Jillian's presence. I promise you, I won't see her again, okay? Please. Don't leave me. He looked like he truly regretted it. But I didn't regret it. I shook my head firmly and said to cold words. Too late. I saw a tear roll down from the corner of his eye. Finally, it disappeared into his messy white shirt. He finally broke down in tears. On the day I left for New York, I received a text message from an unknown number. Even though I had deleted the number, I couldn't forget the last 4 digits. 8768. It was Jillian. She only sent 3 words. You lost. I scoffed lightly and calmly added her number to the blacklist. I slept like a log for the 3 to 4 hours on the flight, and when I woke up, my social media showed 99 plus unread messages. Curious, I opened it and found that a video from the court hearing had gone viral again, trending at the top. The most popular tweet was a video of the fire. In the video, the initial fire at the villa wasn't very large. It was completely manageable with a fire extinguisher. Jillian successfully dragged Ethan out. But she went back in just 2 minutes later. In the gas-filled villa, she lit a lighter. In an instant, the flames engulfed the curtains, the sofa, and other fabric items. Jillian panicked and clumsily tried to escape the villa. But a sudden small explosion caused her to scream and cover her eyes, crawling out of the villa with difficulty. Then came the follow-up with the firefighters arriving to put out the fire. The comments section was in an uproar. Oh my God, did she do it on purpose? Such deep scheming. So she tried to take credit and failed, getting herself blinded in the process? Wow, does this count as arson? Disgusting. The wave of public opinion surged. I logged out of my account, and at that moment, an unknown number suddenly appeared on my phone screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello? There was only heavy breathing on the other end. No one spoke. I guessed who it was, and just as I was about to hang up, he spoke. His tone was strained. Alex, if I hadn't been with Jillian, would you still have chosen to leave me? I couldn't help but laugh. Actually, I'm very grateful to Jillian. She made me see your true, despicable nature. If I had been deceived by you my whole life, wouldn't that have been worse? Don't contact me again. I added finally. From now on, we are strangers. I hung up the phone. Even though, at that moment, I could hear the sobs from the other end. The situation with Jillian caused quite a stir. Although I didn't intend to follow it, my colleagues' heated discussions informed me that Jillian had been sentenced to a few years in prison for arson. I thought that would be the end of it. But later, when I returned from a business trip, I ran into my former boss, who grabbed my arm excitedly. Have you heard? Heard what? The boss clicked his tongue and sighed. On the day Jillian was sentenced, she went crazy. She said she lost her sight saving Ethan, so why should she go to jail? Both the Ethan and Jillian families abandoned her. She somehow got hold of a knife and attacked Ethan several times right there. Even though she couldn't see, every attack was fatal. How ruthless. She said she lost everything because of Ethan and wanted him to pay. I was quite shocked. Apparently, Ethan is still in a coma. That evening, I received a call from Ethan's mother. She begged me to visit Ethan. Before he fell into a coma, he held my hand tightly and told me not to disturb your life. He truly loves you, Alex. Ethan's mother sobbed. He's now unconscious, and the doctors say if he doesn't wake up soon, he might become a vegetable. I thought, since he loves you so much, if you talk to him, maybe he'll get better. I'm begging you, please come and see him, okay? I replied coldly. Auntie, if he truly loved me, he wouldn't have cheated in the first place. From the beginning, the only person he loved was himself and the thrill. Don't call me again. I hung up the phone. On the flight back to New York, I took out my phone's SIM card, and as the evening breeze from New York blew in, I tossed the card behind me. It fell into the black tracks receding into the distance. It plunged into an endless abyss. Yet, the plane carried me farther and farther away, towards a future full of hope.